So we're going to be asking you a bunch of different questions, but you'll have 3 minutes to answer each question. And the first question we want to ask you is just to introduce yourself to readers and tell us why you're running for Placer County Sheriff.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me today. It's really a pleasure to be talking to you guys and get my message out. So, I currently live in Newcastle. I'm a Placer County resident, obviously. Raised my 3 children here in this community between Loomis and Newcastle. But I didn't grow up in Placer County. I actually was born and raised in the Orangevale and Fair Oaks area of Sacramento County. My father was an immigrant. He came to this country at 13 years old from China, not speaking any English, immersed himself in this culture, an amazing man. He actually graduated from San Juan High School. In his senior year, he was student class president. Just kind of goes to show the kind of man he was to come here at that age and be able to accomplish that by the time he was a senior. He joined the United States Army and came home, and with him and his brothers, they started a grocery store in Orangevale. So I grew up in a family that were small businessmen. The supermarket used to be called the Capri Market. It was located at the corner of Hazel and Greenback in Orangevale, kind of a staple of the community back in the day. And so that's where I grew up. I worked for my family. After school, you would go do your homework at the store and work until mom and dad went home. They often worked 7 days a week at the time. And then in the 80s, our family's grocery store went out of business as some more chains kind of moved in the area. And my father took his share and he got a 7-Eleven franchise out off Mack Road near Valley High, over behind the Kaiser there. And so when I was in high school, I would go down after high school and I worked at kind of a modified swing shift at the 7-Eleven. And my father was able to get 2 more franchises after that. And, it was kind of my expectation, I think, to follow in the family business and take over. And it really wasn't my calling. And somebody talked about law enforcement. I didn't grow up wanting to be a police officer or a deputy sheriff. And the more I thought about it, the more it resonated with me. And so when I was 20 years old, I went to the police academy and I got hired by the Lake County Sheriff's Office. So I've pretty much been doing this my entire adult life. I went to Lake County from 1990 until 1994. And then in 1994, I came home. I wanted to come back closer to family. I had relatives that lived in Placer County. I love Placer County. And so I moved here in 94, began working for the sheriff's office. I've had the most blessed career. I was able to do anything I could ever want. I worked over 18 years on the SWAT team, worked undercover narcotics, sergeant over our special operations unit. I was a trainer, use of force instructor. And then I began my leadership journey at the sheriff's office. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of is as I did that, I didn't really just fast track through any of the ranks. I made sure that I really learned as much as I could and hit that journeyman level. So I spent over 5 years as sergeant, over 5 years as a lieutenant, over 5 years as a captain. And I've been the undersheriff for over 5 years, run the day-to-day operations with Sheriff Devin Bell. And that between my education, having a master's degree in justice management from the University of Nevada, Reno, and I'm in my 32nd year of public service and law enforcement now, I think makes me highly qualified and ready to take the next step and lead as Placer County's next sheriff.
I'll go ahead and ask the next question. Under Sheriff Wu, what new initiatives would you take as sheriff to seize more of the illegal guns on our streets?
Well, there's a couple of things I'm proud of, and one of them is our crime rates here in Placer County. I think we've done really well. If you look at our crime rates, and not just year over year, but even over the last 5 years. So we recently did a budget presentation, and year over year, our crime rates are down, unlike anywhere else in the state. And then it's not just an anomaly. If you go back even 5 years and back to 2017, our crime rates are down from there. But we are seeing a dramatic increase in a few things. One of those is the amount of illegal guns we're taking off the street. Over year, we saw a dramatic increase, I think kind of through COVID and then through some of the civil unrest, but we've started pulling, our deputy sheriffs are starting to pull more and more illegal guns off the streets in Placer County. And we're starting to see a lot more vehicle pursuits, people resisting arrest, foot pursuits, things like that. So while our deputy sheriffs are doing a phenomenal job, the men and women out there, it is becoming more and more dangerous. And so we want to continue to make sure that we're promoting proactive policing and that we have a healthy criminal justice system, and that deputy sheriffs are continuing to be proactive out there in our community and removing these guns off the streets. And then our investigation units are following up on these cases and trying to track down, where these illegal guns are coming from, not just, stopping at a single arrest when we're contacting these people. And so those are a couple of areas that I would like to focus on, because we are seeing a couple of spikes in different crime categories in our community, which is concerning for Placer County. And the amount of illegal guns is one of those.
Undersheriff Wu, with the Placer County Board of Supervisors having recently passed an anti-camping policy during certain hours and on certain property, how do you see the Sheriff's Department role in responding to the homelessness crisis?
So the Sheriff's Office does have a role. Homelessness is an extremely complex issue, and we're working very hard to try to address it. And I think it has to be addressed from a variety of different approaches. I'm proud of actually the job that Placer County has done. We have, I think, the lowest homeless rate in Northern California. We have the 4th lowest homeless rates in the whole state. And if you look at unsheltered homeless, we are the lowest in the state. So what we're doing has been working. Is it a perfect system? Of course it's not. Can we always get better? Of course we can. And some of the things we have been doing, at least from the Sheriff's Office perspective, is we've really tried to get focused on that continuum of care. One of the things when I was a jail commander, I implemented, and now as undersheriff, I've authorized and we implemented as one of the first in the state of California with our medical provider, was kind of the One Care program. Because what was happening was, a lot of these homeless individuals do suffer from mental illness, drug and alcohol addiction, and they would sometimes get stabilized, or they would often get stabilized once they were in custody, and then they would be released back out on the street without any kind of warm handoff. So we've really worked hard at partnering with our community-based organizations, our health and human services. We make sure they have at least 2 or 3 days of their prescription medications. And we don't just kick them out the back door of the jail and tell them good luck. We try to line up all the resources we can, whether it's Medi-Cal and then a direct connection to HHS and some community-based organizations. So I think that's going to be critical moving forward to continue that. And we really need to figure out a way to address those individuals that don't want help because of their mental health and addiction issues. And whether that, there's a lot of talk at the legislature about changing some of the conservatorship models, because back in the day, right, wrong, or indifferent, the criminal justice system used to play a bigger role in that. People would get arrested when there was room in the jail facility and narcotics were a felony, and these addicts would go in, they'd get forced to clean up, and then they would go to drug court and be supervised. And, those things aren't in place now. And some of these people aren't going to seek help on their own. And so I think that'll be a critical component moving forward. But I think Placer County is doing well, but we need to be very smart and take a very methodical approach moving forward to continue to attack the problem from all angles. And the Sheriff's Office does have a role in that. But I wished I could had an easy answer to solve it. I think I would retire and be a consultant and make millions of dollars touring the country and helping to solve the problem for other communities. It's a complex societal issue, but those are some of the things that we've done at the Sheriff's Office under my leadership, and that I would continue to try to promote and work collaboratively with all of our stakeholders.
As just a quick follow-up to that as well, is there something that you see the Sheriff's Department currently doing in that arena that you would like to change, that you feel could be done better?
That's interesting, because I think so. When I was a field operations captain, I was actually the one that was responsible for standing up our transient liaison program and our problem-oriented policing officers. And at the time, I don't even remember how many years ago it was now, at least 6 or 8 years ago, we were kind of a model in the state. Placer County is super unique in that we've always had a really good collaborative working approach with all of our stakeholders, whether it's intergovernmental or community-based organizations. And as we were trying to figure out the best way to stand up that program, we teamed up with probation and health and human services and had social workers are embedded in our team. And as we looked around the state trying to find models to maybe look at or copy, they really, those models didn't exist. And we were kind of cutting edge at the time. And since then, a lot of jurisdictions have copied our model. but to change and get better, I would probably have to go back and say it kind of goes back to my last answer. I think, the DeWitt lawn, as I'm sure what you're referring to with the no camping ordinance, and it's a very difficult problem because you could go out with any one of our transient liaison deputies and ask them all if they would like to go to the shelter because there's space available, and 99% of them will tell you no. So I think it would probably be focusing on some of those issues we were talking about earlier, whether it's as a legislative angle. I spent the last 7 years as a member of the State Sheriff's Association Legislative Committee, so I do help weigh in on things down at the Capitol to help provide insight on things that are impact public safety and quality of life. And I really think that there has to be housing earned and possibly a deeper look at how do we force, whether it's through conservatorship, whether they meet that gravely disabled level, and get these people into some forced care until they dry out and get stabilized. And then I think we can move on and actually really address the problems. But continuing to allow them to camp unsheltered like that, I don't know is helping the community. And honestly, it's not helping the individuals either.
Under Sheriff, I know your opponent is currently involved in an ongoing lawsuit where he's accused of using sexually charged language against Sheriff Sergeant Megan Yaz. And I understand your campaign is distancing itself from this lawsuit. However, I did want to offer you the opportunity to give a comment on this lawsuit. And if you decline to do so, at the very least, are you willing and able to strongly condemn any forms of harassment in the Sheriff's Department?
Well, 100% I'm willing to go on the record and condemn any forms of harassment in the Sheriff's Office because this is active litigation. And I think we have a trial date set for May 23rd off the top of my head. I really can't comment on it. Except to say that, I was contacted by the Bee previously. I am running a clean campaign on basically my experience, my education, and the fact that I'm the best person for the job, and it in no way came from me or my campaign. I will say that, but as far as getting into the details, I can't because I am a witness in this upcoming trial. But 100%. Do not condone any kind of sexual harassment in the workplace whatsoever, and none of that is tolerated at the Sheriff's Office now or would be tolerated under my leadership. It's 100% unacceptable, and quite frankly, extremely offensive.
Have you, as undersheriff or any part in your career, have you ever participated in or been a part of any programs designed to halt harassment in its tracks or to teach employees and other members of staff what the signs are?
We provide all Sheriff's Office personnel with, it's really all county personnel with the mandated sexual harassment training, and there's greater hour requirements depending on your level in the agency, as become supervisors and management. And so the county has a pretty robust platform. They contract with a third-party vendor that provides the training on a regular basis to all county employees, not just members of the Sheriff's Office.
And what is your opinion on the necessity of bringing diverse genders and races into the Sheriff's Department?
I have no problem with bringing anybody into the Sheriff's Office. We're always looking for the most qualified people to serve our community. Probably no secret to any of you on the call. Law enforcement has taken a little bit of a beating over the last few years. We have a lot of repairing to do with our relationships with the community, the trust that our community has in us to provide a level of service. I tell all of our staff, we police this community with the consent of this community. And I also tell them we police with this community, not at the community. And I think those are some keys. And because of all the dynamics that have happened in public safety just across the country, recruitment is way down. Enrollment in criminal justice programs in colleges are way down. Academy enrollment is way down. And so I'm looking for the best, most qualified people to take that oath and want to serve their community regardless of gender, race, anything like that.
Under Sheriff, I believe you're endorsed by every current member of the Placer County Board of Supervisors. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I know you're also endorsed by former Sacramento Sheriff Scott Jones, who's now running for Congress. As sheriff, Scott Jones approved thousands of concealed carry permits, far more than his predecessors and many other law enforcement leaders around the state. I'm wondering, do you believe that Jones dangerously added to the proliferation of guns in this region? And would you, as sheriff, be stricter in granting gun permits?
So not knowing directly what Sheriff Jones and his policies are and his thresholds are and what went on in Sacramento County, I can't really answer that. But I will speak on behalf of the Placer County Sheriff's Office and myself. I do believe in the Second Amendment. Our concealed weapon policies at the Sheriff's Office would not change under my administration from what they currently are now. And quite frankly, we saw, if you look at the data, we saw a pretty big spike over the last couple of years as we went through COVID and then we went through the civil unrest. Residents of Placer County didn't feel safe, and we had a lot more applicants for CCWs than we'd ever seen in the past. And we got a pretty big backlog from it. I think it's important for community members to feel safe, especially if they are law-abiding citizens and have good cause and they want the right to carry concealed. I think that's important, and I would continue to offer that to citizens of Placer County.
Ooh, Robin, I think you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, thank you.
Sorry, I have trouble with my computer right now. Last year, Roseville waitress Vita Jaga was shot and killed in broad daylight at her place of work by her former fiance. According to the Education Fund to Stop Gun Violence, over half of all intimate partner homicides are committed with a gun, and a woman is 5 times more likely to be murdered when her abuser has access to a gun. So how would you, as sheriff, get guns out of the hands of domestic abusers?
Well, yes, gun violence is a problem just in the United States in general. We are kind of a gun society. It's just been our country's culture since it was founded. And domestic violence is an issue. You know, we have a lot of issues in Placer County that are very unique that, you know, a lot of other counties like Sacramento County and other things don't face as far as what's more dangerous. You know, for me, things like DUI and other things put my family in more jeopardy than maybe going to the Galleria Mall and getting robbed or something like that. But getting back to gun violence and domestic violence, our domestic violence rates are still low. I think they're around, they don't even make the top 5 categories in our highest crime rates. I want to say off the top of my head, they might be below 5%. But we do have programs in place where we remove the guns from the home once there's domestic violence and domestic violence restraining orders. We follow up with those and we remove these guns from offenders' homes to try to make sure that there's no future violence. Domestic violence is a very difficult cases to prosecute sometimes as well. We make a lot of arrests and then the victims decide to change their mind. They don't want to follow through with prosecution. One of the things I'm kind of excited about is a body-worn camera initiative that I've been pushing for the last 6 years. And the Board of Supervisors finally funded it this last year. And I actually really think that body-worn cameras and getting body-worn camera recorded statements from domestic violence victims when the incidents happen will help us prosecute offenders at a higher rate as we move forward. But I would say my stance on domestic violence and trying to protect victims is the reason why I'm also endorsed by Crime Victims United of California, which is, you know, one of the largest organizations that does represent crime victims and has passed some phenomenal crime victim legislation over the last couple of decades for victims in California.
You mentioned earlier that you're part of a legislative liaison for sheriffs in the area. As a sheriff, you would need to work with the county board of supervisors. You would be expected to weigh in on legislation on a state level. Are those things that you're comfortable doing?
100%. That's why I've been doing it for the last 7 years. As a member of the legislative committee for the State Sheriff's Association, very active in working with the association and the committee on really trying to have a voice at the table. There's been a lot of criminal justice reform over the last, I could go back to AB 109, but even more recent over the last 5 to 7 years, a lot of criminal justice reform. And, having that voice at the table, there's a lot of legislators that have very good intent and they don't understand the unintended consequences. And our role, and my role, in my opinion, is not to go yell from the mountaintops and be confrontational. It's to go have these meetings with these lawmakers and try to explain unintended consequences and impacts. And that's really how the state sheriff's office legislative team works down at the Capitol. And, we get amendments and we help work collaboratively with these legislators. My collaborative way and the way I do business also extends, you talked about the Board of Supervisors, but to get maybe the meaning and to accomplish the goal that they're trying to address with some of these laws, and maybe reduce a lot of these unintended consequences that often come out of rushed legislation that might be a knee-jerk response to a horrific act or something that goes on in the media, right? So it's having that balancing act, but in my opinion, you have to have relationships and you have to have a voice at the table, and you do that through collaboration. And my collaborative nature and style, I think, is why I am endorsed by every Board of Supervisor and every mayor in Placer County, because they understand that public safety is not something to be gambled with. And I have the knowledge, skills, and most importantly, the experience, and I know how to get the job done. I've been doing it for the last 5 years, but more importantly, the way I work with people in a collaborative way to get the best result for our community.
Last year, current Sheriff Devin Bell released a statement linking a man's death to the COVID vaccine, though it was later revealed that the cause of death was not related to the vaccination. His post was seized upon by anti-vaccine advocates to spread misinformation about the vaccine. I'm curious, did you agree with the sheriff's actions to release that statement, despite the Placer County health officer asking him not to?
Yes, I actually did. And this was a very difficult decision. And I will try to provide as much context as to the reasoning behind the decision, understanding there are HIPAA regulations. And I think to lay the foundation of the basis behind the decision is Sheriff Devin Bell and I have always tried to err on the side of transparency. And we are the county coroner. So, there are a lot of people that were like, well, why are you even weighing in on this? This is a public health matter. But it is our job to investigate cause and manner of death. Without trying to get into HIPAA information that the family is asked to not be released and get into, I will say that this was very early on. It wasn't a decision or information that we came up with on our own. There were medical professionals that had treated the victim for many hours at many different levels, where I think if any reasonable person would have talked to these people and read their medical notes and diagnosis, they would have come to the same conclusion that we did. And so we were faced in this really tough spot of, could this be a bad lot of vaccines? And we have this information. Are we not being transparent if we don't release it? And would we have to live with it if it was a bad lot or somebody else died in the few days in a very similar situation when they took that lot of the vaccine? And our community was very divided, right? We were going to make half of them angry and half of them happy, regardless of our decision that we made. And at the end of the day, we fell back on transparency in that we didn't think it was our place to withhold the information. We did our best to try to, if you go back and look at exactly how it was worded, we specifically didn't say, because we didn't want to make, even though, maybe others were implying that had a lot more medical experience than we did, we still tried to thread the needle as best we could. And unfortunately, obviously COVID and everything is a very divisive topic. We got painted as a bunch of anti-vaxxers. The sheriff and I were both vaccinated. His wife was working at the vaccine clinic trying to get as many citizens of Placer County vaccinated as possible. I'm not sure there was an easy answer on any of those, on either decision we would have made, because had we sat on the information for 5 or 7 days, the autopsy said it was as a result. Maybe more people died. And so we just decided that we would err on the side of transparency and let the citizens know, and they could make their decisions themselves. If they wanted to wait a few more days until we had the autopsy, or if they wanted to continue to move ahead. But that was a very difficult situation. And honestly, as hard as it was to go through, as I look back at all the information I had at the time and what drove us to that decision, I actually don't know if I would change the decision if I had to do it again today.
Mhm.
Even though it's a lot of heartache and pain for us.
I had a follow-up, which was that I know there's a current Assembly Bill 1608, I think it's the Angelo Quinto Act, that would separate the duties of coroner from the duties of sheriff. I'm wondering what you think of that bill.
I understand why they're trying to do that, and a lot of it there's the thought that there's a conflict of interest, right? If we get an officer involved shooting, there's a conflict of interest for the sheriff's office to then oversee the autopsy and do that kind of stuff. And we have protocols in place where we will farm those out to Sacramento County or other forensic pathologists in those cases. Now, we've done some of them ourselves, but when we made those decisions, they were clear-cut investigations and everything was caught on video. Like the gentleman that we had shot down on Highway 65 and 80 after he went on a shooting spree in Placer County and murdered a woman on her front door in Newcastle. And it was all caught on video. There was going to be no question. But so I think that's some of the catalyst behind that bill. This isn't the first time they've tried to run a bill like that. And I think it would be better off, as I talked earlier about, sitting down at the table and coming up with amendments and trying to address the problem without making it more difficult. Maybe there's protocols in place out of this bill that says if your agency has the officer involved shooting, you're mandated to contract out with somebody else. Would be a better fix. And this is opposed not just by sheriffs, it's opposed by CSAC as well, because the majority of counties are sheriff coroners. And they do that because of cost. So this state mandate, with a lot of Northern California counties who aren't maybe fiscally as in good a shape as Placer County, could not afford to stand up a completely different division of medical examiners and staff and do that. And it's very cost prohibitive. And there's many counties in the state that wouldn't be able to do it. And that's why the Association of Counties is opposed to it and state sheriffs are opposed to it. But I think there's easy legislative fixes and amendments that could be made to address the concern without blowing up the whole program and causing a lot of these other counties to go into financial crisis over, a legislative mandate.
Having such trouble with my clicker today. I'm so sorry. So I was wondering, what are your thoughts on Governor Gavin Newsom's decision to release certain California inmates during the height of the COVID pandemic?
I understand why they did it. We were having to release inmates as well. I mean, our jail is still not functioning at full capacity. I am proud to say, and I don't know if I should jinx myself, we didn't have a single inmate death during the whole COVID pandemic. There's many agencies smaller than ours that did. We had very strict protocols that we put in place early on, and we had to clear our population as well. It's still to this day, every new inmate that stays in our jail goes on a 14-day isolation tank, and they're separated from all inmates, even though they've had a test, and we offer a vaccine right at intake if they want it. They still occupy cells for 14 days. And so it dramatically decreased our overall population, and we needed the room. I know the state was faced with some of those issues. So I can't necessarily totally criticize and I don't know the thought process on who was released. I mean, we did our best to release, hopefully nonviolent people that were going to go out and victimize others. Obviously, as a 30-year peace officer, I don't think inmates should constantly be getting let out of prison early when they haven't paid their dues to society, but COVID was a very unique situation that we had to address. I will say that one thing that frustrated us as state sheriffs was not only did they let inmates out early, but they closed down intake. And so there were sheriff's jails bursting at the seams, and we didn't get to close down intake. When people were arrested and a threat to the community, they still had to come in the jail. And, in Placer County, we were routinely holding well over 100 inmates that belonged in state prison, and state prison wouldn't let us bring them down. So that was more of a policy that I had a little bit of a problem with, and that was impacting public safety in our community. But when you face something like COVID, you're doing the best you can at the time. And we had to make some similar adjustments at the wheel too. And hopefully we're all starting to move on from that.
Under Sheriff, I know one of your policy platforms is crime prevention, like prevention before crime occurs. What does that look like? I know some folks we've interviewed have talked about like upstream prevention, maybe like, getting youth off the streets. But I guess I think that's sort of more relevant for metropolitan areas like Sacramento. And what does that look like in Placer County?
I think it's a multifaceted approach. I do think early intervention is important. It's always been a passion of mine. As a captain, I was the driving force behind standing up our Sheriff's Activities League, which targets at-risk youth in the North Auburn area. I also served for 6 years on the Kids First and Child Abuse Prevention Council of Placer County and Family Resource Center. And so that is a part of it. The other part of it is proactive policing. I think when there's a metric in crime rates that you can't measure, and that is how much crime was prevented, right? You'll never know. But I do think solid proactive policing, having adequate staffing levels, having staff that are motivated to go out and prevent crime before it occurs and be proactive is an important component. Like I mentioned before, we police with this community, not to this community. So it is a partnership, and building those community relationships and following through with our community-oriented policing plans is extremely important. For me, one of my primary platforms that I would like to implement, at least in this first term, should I be victorious, is we're in the process of hopefully in the next month getting through a couple of projects from Senate Bill 863 and 844, which these were some 10% match by the county state grants to one. We're going to build a 45-bed mental health facility at our South Placer Jail, and then we're going to build a 120-bed job skill medium security training center. That is what I think is the most important when you talk about impacting crime rates and crime prevention, right? You're going to do your best on the front end, but then once crime occurs, how are we going to try to be smart and impact recidivism rates? And we have all kinds of inmate programming, through COVID. Just this last year, we started a Serve Safe and a culinary program. We trained 180 inmates with their Serve Safe certifications before they got released, because there was a shortage in our region for food service industry workers. So I put it in our strategic plan that not only do I want to focus on inmate programming at this job skill training center, but I don't want to be as stagnant as government can be. I want to reevaluate, what does our job market in the region look like every 2 years? And let's pivot and be nimble. Because I think the key to impacting recidivism rates, we can talk about programming and things all you want. I really think the key is giving people meaningful work where they can make a living wage. I think that is a big key to keeping people from going back to a life of crime. And as you look at our region, and specifically Placer County, we're getting ready to face unprecedented growth, maybe 30% over the next 10 years. That's 30,000 more people in Placer County, and the construction industry is booming, and there's a shortage in construction workers. So do we focus on the trades? Do we have a plumbing certification, framing, construction industry of all types, and start to use that job skill training center to give our inmates those skills to where when they get released and work with some of these companies for second chance job opportunities, that they can get that meaningful work, not only fulfill the job demand that we're going to have in Placer County and our region, but give these people second chance jobs, meaningful work, and living wages, so they won't return to a life of crime. And I think attacking it from all those different angles is the key. At least in my opinion, when you ask about, my viewpoint on crime prevention per se.
Under Sheriff Wu, your opponent has been endorsed by former Arizona Sheriff Richard Mack. He was a longtime member of the Oath Keepers, a far-right militia group. Extremist ideologies have been on the rise for several years now, and we've seen multiple instances of this in Placer County.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you're willing to condemn these sort of far-right neo-Nazi white supremacist ideologies, and two, what are your thoughts on the rise of this and what you can do as sheriff to keep the community safe from violence that might erupt?
Yeah, of course I condemn any neo-Nazi ideologies, or I condone any discrimination at any level, not just neo-Nazi, especially as somebody who, I grew up, my father was an immigrant here. Specifically in regards to, some of the far-right ideology that you've seen, and especially in Placer County. I think COVID has had a weird impact on our society on many levels. And one of them is, this loss of trust in the government and some of our governmental systems, which I think has allowed them to recruit more. I do think the constitutional sheriff ideology is dangerous, and I don't agree with it. My perspective is this: our founding fathers and our country was founded with 3 prongs of government for a reason. There's separation of powers for a reason. We have the judicial branch, the legislative branch, and the executive branch. And my job is the executive branch. I don't get to decide what is legal and what is not legal as the sheriff. Now, there's a fine line in that as an elected sheriff, you are listed in the Constitution of California. So when people say, are you a constitutional sheriff? I say, well, every sheriff is constitutional. They're listed in the Constitution, but I'm also sworn to uphold the Constitution of the state of California and the Constitution of the United States. It doesn't give me the authority to enforce federal laws. I don't get to be an immigration officer. But on the flip side, when I go back to that separation of powers, it also doesn't give me the right as sheriff to decide what is constitutionally legal and what is not. That's for the courts to decide. And I think it is a very, very dangerous ideology to think that one person, whether that be the sheriff or whoever, which in this case, you're talking about the office of the sheriff, to think that I can combine 2 branches of our government and have that much authority, which is I think dangerous and goes against everything that our country was founded on. I hope that explains at least my perspective on it. But yeah, I mean, I do get asked a lot about it, and that's what I tell them. Look, they can't tell me how to deploy my resources, but I don't get to decide what's legal and what's not either. That's for the courts to decide.
Under Sheriff, we've exhausted our list of questions for you, but I did want to give you a few minutes just for some closing thoughts, or to talk about any issues or policies we didn't ask you about that you think would be worthwhile to discuss.
Yeah, it was a pretty in-depth interview, so I appreciate that. You guys, we touched on a lot of the hot button topics like homelessness and everything else. I would like to just finish with saying this. If you look at my career and you look at my record, I'm in my 32nd year of law enforcement. I'm seriously doing this, not because I'm My pension is maxed out. There's no financial incentive for me to stay. I'm staying because COVID had a weird impact on my life. My older two children had gone to college and moved away and started their careers, and they came back home to Placer County. I have a granddaughter being raised here now, and I have a grandson that's going to be born any day. So I will have two grandchildren being raised in this community. I raised my family in this community. We're at a critical time in Placer County with our quality of life that we want to preserve and this rapid growth, and how do we balance all that? And I know that my 32 years of experience, my over 5 years of running the day-to-day operations of the agency as the undersheriff is the experience needed to lead Placer County right now. And with my leadership style and my collaborative approach, I think that's why 100% I have the endorsement of current Sheriff Devin Bell, our previous Sheriff Ed Bonner, every Board of Supervisor, every mayor, crime victims, our district attorney. I could go down the list of my endorsements, but there's a reason why they endorse me, and it's because they know that we have a complex agency. Our budget this year is over $171 million. We have over 600 employees. Public safety is not something to be risked on an unknown, and I have the experience, the passion to still serve, and the drive to continue to keep Placer County one of the best places to live in our entire region and state. And that's why I'm doing this. So I appreciate your guys' time. I appreciate the conversation and your questions. And I guess that's it. I'll close with that. So thank you.